Welcome to the Web in Art on Juicy Journaling. We're going to be talking about making art in small spaces and doing things in sketchbooks, journals, and altered books that you can do outside the classroom to extend the lessons so that students can practice what you're preaching. So as you think about juicy journaling, you can think about how you can allow your students to experiment with subject matter and media. Welcome to the Web in Art on Juicy Journaling. We're going to be talking about making art in small spaces and doing things in sketchbooks, journals, and altered books that you can do outside the classroom to extend the lessons so that students can practice what you're preaching. So as you think about juicy journaling, you can think about how you can allow your students to experiment with subject matter and media. They can practice their classroom lessons to build confidence. In other words, they can draw people or sketch buildings or sketch anything that you want them to sketch to practice. They can saturate their senses by sketching on the spot. The strategies, as I said earlier, can extend your art lessons, and students will have fun expressing themselves because they can also do what they want to do in their sketchbooks and journals some of the time. The good news is juicy journaling could actually be considered a best practice because statistics show that engagement during arrival to class promotes a quieter, more enthusiastic, involved learner. So warm-ups can spark the imagination. They can get the creative juices flowing and at the same time involve higher order thinking skills and introduce the concepts for either the day or the week. When I go to my art studio, I do warm-ups. You might want to start your assignments for the year in your journals with one of two things that I always used. I gave my students a page of 100 different possibilities for journal assignments. I also gave them the evaluation sheet so that they knew how they were going to be evaluated at the end of the year. For example, all pages were filled with quality drawings and collage. All pages were two-page spreads that go together. There were high-quality designs that were neatly executed. Pages were dedicated to art rather than just cutting and pasting materials to fill the pages. And it was an imaginative use of drawings, pictures, poetry, photos, and designs. This presentation will be sharing some journal assignments that were successful with my students, and this one was self-portraits. So the journal or sketchbook or altered book is the perfect place to experiment with human portraiture. And so here Tina Trang did a Conte crayon piece self-portrait on the left, and Rebecca Ramirez did a marker rendering, kind of like the style of Lichtenstein with little circles like you would see in a newspaper or a comic strip. And my students would investigate a lot of their series for their AP portfolios in their sketchbook journals before doing it larger. Here, Philip Contreras, who is now a practicing artist in Houston, did a pencil self-portrait in value, and then later in his sketchbook during his 4th year, he did a Prismacolor full color rendering of his face. Before we go any further, I wanted to share these resources with you because when I was out of teaching for a short duration of time, I built some websites where I put some of my resources up. So my virtual art room member-only Teachers Lounge has 5 different presentations which together total 359 different images of Art 1, Art 2, Art 3, Art 4, and then a sketchbook journal presentation with 68 different slides, and then an AP advanced placement of Chelsea Carnatas. So I just wanted to share that with you before we went any further, so you can check it out if you'd like to. If you signed up at my virtual art room, you would have gotten a calendar, a monthly calendar every month in 2012, and every month gave different suggestions for juicy journaling assignments. And self-portraiture we've already talked about, but here are some examples of that. But one of my favorite self-portrait assignments included having my Art 3 students do a 2-page spread with a portrait on one side and an artist statement, an illuminated artist statement on the other side. And here's Karen Tans, and I'd like to share her artist statement with you. She said, "If all difficulties were known at the outset of a long journey, some of us would never start out at all. This quote best possibly describes the challenges ahead that I have to overcome. Art has been a game that I have had both defeats and victories. This year in advanced art, I hope to play the best I can and challenge myself to achieve higher goals. Problems that I have had in the past are due to poor craftsmanship and patience. I also wish to be more spontaneous with my work and allow myself to be completely free. One of my biggest problems, however, is acceptance of what I have accomplished. Art is not a form, but a communication tool, just as Amadi Ozenfant said. Art is the demonstration that the ordinary is extraordinary." What I love about that is that I would have never known that Karen was such a wordsmith, and you learn so much about your students by giving them the opportunity to not only draw but also to write. Here on the second calendar, we're actually looking at what I called the name game or the name event, our name plates. And I had my students, most of the time while I was going over the rules and the requirements in the course and the curriculum, they would take an index card and write their name. And I said, if you can write your name, you can do this. And so they would write their name, and of course how they wrote and designed their name that very first day told me a lot about the students. It told me a lot about their skill level, and it also told me about their work habits. Here you see Philip Contreras', that was his index card. On the left are my 8th grade students. Emma Goldberg did 2 index cards, and Viviana Hernandez did the one with the sticky gum. She was a 7th grader. And then Jason Pizzatola did the 16 variations of his name and our initials in the front cover of his 3rd year journal. So try this out. It's a great way to learn your students' names while you also learn and become familiar with their skill level. On this month, you see some pen and ink studies and some different subject matter, the eagle and the old man, and then a still life, and red square. And then some pen and ink exercises that were good for teaching young people how to use the pen strokes or the rapidographs or the fine point markers in an orderly, repetitive way. Although this is pen thinking, and we just talked about pen and ink, this is a little bit different in that I gave the students the design motifs that designers use when they design wallpaper and fabric. You see the ogee and the square and the diamond and the triangle. And the students had to do a black and white design in any one of those in each of the formats, and then they gave it to me and I glued all 4 of them on the page, and then I went down to the copy machine and made 30 copies. Then I brought them back to the students and they had to place them in their sketchbook journals in a repeated pattern. Then they had to go into that repeated pattern into a shape and turn it into a color harmony. You also see on the right-hand side a positive and negative assignment that I gave my Art 2s in their journal, in the book plates of their journal. Right in the front, they had to put their name in black on white and then white on black. Here are 3 of my favorite assignments in sketchbooks, because some days I would just tell the students to do whatever they wanted to do, to practice their dream career. So here Karen Tan practiced being a children's book illustrator. And then the second assignment in the middle was the adventures of an apple. And the students had to interpret an apple in the style of a great master. And here is an interpretation of Paul Cézanne's apples, and they had to then write some notes about that artist. And on the right, bottom right, this was like Leonardo. They had to draw something in the style of Leonardo da Vinci. And the only thing missing here is the writing is not backwards in Italian. Another favorite assignment of mine was heart art, always due on February 14th, Valentine's Day, and the students could do anything they wanted to do as long as it incorporated the symbol of a heart. They could do a traditional Valentine, they could make something they could wear, they could bring something in that everybody could eat, they could sculpt something with a heart. They could paint on a canvas, paint in their sketchbook, draw in Prismacolor, or do pretty much anything they wanted to do. And this is Jeff Fila's series of 3 with his heart on a podium pedestal on the left, like in an art gallery. And then secondly, his heart on a chain, and then his heart with thorns and a skull and crossbones. Here during Youth Art Month on the calendar, I put 3 different student assignments that show 3 different ideas. The first was Vanna Walpole's when I gave them the choice to do anything they want to do. She was a fabulous design creator. So she did this beautiful colored design on the left. Wouldn't it make a beautiful silk scarf? And then Bonnie Buckley did a study or a plan for her line and foliage with her self-portrait behind it. And then Philip Contreras did a name design using 2-point perspective. During the month of April, the subscribers got a calendar that shows zone pieces. You can actually have students do a subject matter, whether it's a portrait, a plant, or still life, and then they break the piece up into zones and play in the different zones with either different media, like you see on the left, charcoal, acrylic, Dr. Martin's dyes, and pencil. Or you can do techniques like the plant on the right. It had stippling, crosshatch, a value study, and the different techniques were in the different zones. So a good thing to do to experiment with either media or technique. Now here are some assignments for journals, and I'm going to go from left to right on the top. First, a new spin on color, which would be a creative color wheel, where students have to show color mixing, understanding with red, yellow, and blue, making secondary, and then secondary and a tertiary, making secondary and a primary, making a tertiary color. And then patterns, a self-portrait that uses figure ground ambiguity, a mural plan on the top right, a Houston Livestock Show plan on the bottom left, and then the frog and the redbird answer the question, what would I see if I walked into your world? And then Philip Contreras' self-portrait. The sketchbook can be considered a portable studio. So here are some sketches on the spot that I did when I was traveling. On top left, you see some trees and some shadows cast, and then some the redwood forest in California, and then River Road in New Braunfels, and then an old house in the trees and a field on the way back from Huntsville. So you can actually use your sketchbook to go out on the spot and draw and paint. I like this journal entry. I found it in a book, and when I do retail therapy, I photograph out of books, and I like it. It's stenciled letters saying I've always been the one to blame. And then in the little print, it says, I feel that even though I blame others, most of my issues are my own fault. I need to focus on my own actions. And I think journaling is a great way to solve problems, both inner and outer problems. You can think about things, you can reflect on life, and it's a private place to think about those kinds of things and write and draw and paint about it. Here's Chelsea Coronata. She was my Carver high school student, and if you get a chance to see her portfolio in myvirtualartroom.com members only /teachers lounge, she did an entire series of self-portraits. She'd disappear into the back room and come out with this beautiful line drawing or charcoal study or black and white study of her own face. And this particular silk screen was drawn in her sketchbook first and then taken down to the printmaking studio, where she turned it into a huge, about a 36 by 48 size serograph or silk screen. So students can use their sketchbooks as a tool to plan larger pieces and other media. Now, we've already talked about the name event, but here's some close-ups with another name event, the 16 Variations. This is Rich Kohler's, and this was just half of his because it was a 2-page spread. And then this is a close-up of the 7th grader Viviana that did her nameplate. Very creative. They say you can't judge a book by its cover, but you can judge a journal. Here are some different journal covers. On the left, color line designs in 8 different boxes, and then when you fold it in half, there's 4 on the front, 4 on the back. So you'd probably want to include their name or their initials so that their sketchbook journal is easily recognized. These were hand-bound books that the students did. And on the right, we used Renegade materials, and the students had to give me their name and phone number and address, but all jumbled up in a name and number design on brown Classcraft paper with whatever paint we had left over. I love books and I love looking at magazines, and one time I got a college catalog that had this face peeking through a hole in the catalog from the cover onto the first page, and I got this idea for the inside story where my Art 4 students would draw something on the first 2 pages of their journal, and it would have an opening cut into the second page of the journal that you could see through, and you would continue the image, and more specifically on that second page they would write the 10 goals that they hope to achieve that year in art. And it was also based on the idea that if you look deeper into the journal, you get to know the student better as an artist, just like looking inside yourself, if you could, or if you could read minds. So a very innovative project, and the kids they ran with it and did amazing things. The other advantage to having young people work in their sketchbook journals is that the work is in chronological order, and it saves you a whole lot of time in terms of passing out materials and paper. The kids can just work in their journals day after day. And here are some Art 2 self-portraits where we've been doing objects for, day after day after day. And what I asked them to do is bring a mirror in, and they were to hold the mirror in their hand, look in the mirror, and draw the hand holding the mirror with a reflection of themselves in the mirror. Here's a second one of the self-portraits with the mirror held in the hand, capturing the reflection. Here you see the planning stages, the year that we painted canvas covers for our sketchbook journals. Michelle Ng is doing a series of sketchbook investigations of herself and then playing with the colors in her sketchbook. And to the bottom right, Jason Doris is posing for a digital study of himself, but we drew ourselves in sketchbooks and then scanned them and then into the computer and then played with them digitally in our electronic media course. Here's one of my very favorite all-time journal assignments, because I'm a believer that if you write things down, you make them happen. And so here's Paul Brigg, his goals. He's actually drawn himself when he's 64, after the Beatles song. And it says, welcome to a senior sketchbook depicting love, hate, anger, peace, and all sorts. But how Paul did this is he says goals that as time keeps slipping on, and he spelled out his name vertically, and each letter of his name begins the sentence. Like he said, he wants to paint, draw, and ink at the age of 70 and still love it as much as he does today. He wants to animate his own cartoons and then go work for Walt Disney, and he wants to utilize God's gift of nature to show reality in his artwork and live life to the fullest and to appreciate everything that he receives. And by the way, Paul is a Walt Disney animator now and just worked on Frozen as the lead storyboard artist. So I love this piece. It came true. This journal entry is linked to another success story. Nancy Lee came to me in her 3rd year of art and told me that every time she put color in anything, she ruined it. So the long story short of it is I asked her to turn every page in her sketchbook into a color harmony. Warm colors, cool colors, analogous colors, monochromatic colors, warm colors with a touch of cool, cool colors with a touch of warm. And so she proceeded to fill up her 100-page sketchbook journal with color studies. And during her 4th year, she applied for a scholarship, and at the University of Houston awards ceremony, the color professor commented on how beautiful Nancy Lee's work was in terms of color. I looked at her, she looked at me, and she was awarded a four-year full-paid scholarship to University of Houston. So as we saw in the last image, Nancy Lee turned her weaknesses into strengths in using color, but you can also explore elements and principles of design. Here Patty Taylor did a positive and a negative book plate. Each of these is a legal size piece of white paper. Rather than wasting tools or materials, paper or canvas, planning your work in your sketchbook will save you a lot of time. So plan your work your plan. I think the most important thing you can do with your students is to connect with them. And how you connect is to build relationships. How you build relationships is you learn about them, you learn about their interests, you learn who their families are, what they do in their spare time, and you learn an awful lot about your students by flipping through the pages of their journals as you watch them at work. I always gave Freedom Fridays when we had the time in our schedule to do that and we were ahead on things. I would let the students have the freedom to choose what to do in their journal on those days, and they enjoyed it. Kids don't care what you know until they know that you care. Here's a close-up of the color wheel that Dorothy Exis created. It was the assignment to do a new spin on color, and they had to use red, yellow, and blue, the primary colors, and have them mix into the secondary colors, and then have those secondary colors be mixed with the primaries to make tertiary colors. And Dorothy did this particular piece. Her father had a paint company, Exis Paints, and she framed it and gave it to him for Father's Day. It was also published in Davis Publications. These are 3 examples of Karen's work. She caught her mother sleeping on the couch. She looked out her back door and sketched her neighbor's house. And then she brought in her own still life. She brought in a pair of jeans one day, a white shirt another day, and white socks the third day, and hung them on a clothes hanger under a spotlight and did charcoal studies of them for her AP portfolio. We're very near the end of our GC Journaling Web in Art, and I appreciate that you took the time to be with me. I'm Dr. Joan Marsh, and I appreciate that there was interest in watching these. Hopefully they'll get better. I hope, too, that you've derived some benefit, and I hope that you'll share ideas with me so that I can present other sessions and include your material in those sessions as to how this particular presentation sparked ideas for you in the use of in your classroom of GC journals, sketchbooks, and our altered books. So let me leave you with a couple of quotes. Life is a work of art, and we are its artist. And living artfully is expressing who you are through those objects and moments that you create. To live life artfully is to live life fully, with meaning and purpose to bring beauty into being. And so it is. The teacher in me honors the teacher in you. Thank you for being with me. I hope the videos work. We have about 3 or 4 videos that are simply images of journal work that have been done through the years. And don't forget about the websites and the resources. Thank you very much.